She was my backbone, my rock, and I miss her every second, every minute of the day.
This is the story of Raven Gant.
Out here with the gang.
Gang's just like trying to feel me.
Rennie's just retarded. Her usual, she's slow.
I'm not. Need some Vaseline.
Who?
Me. Not you. Why you
Oh.
about you?
I don't. I just be trying to find out, man. I just be trying to make sure it ain't me, you know?
No, me. My shit feel dry.
Are you watching my live standing next to me? I'm like,
Like I hear it twice now.
right, like what the hell? I
Go
just
through
did
it.
that.
I just want to know if they got paid.
Jenny Pooh, I'm live. Hey, live.
On the evening of November 28, 2019, Minneapolis police responded to a 911 call from a home in the city's north side. The report was brief. A woman had been shot. A child was inside the residence. When officers entered the house, they found 27-year-old Raven Gant lying on the floor between the kitchen and dining area. She had been shot once. Her 2-year-old daughter was still inside the home.
I would describe Raven as fun, loving, the life of the room, probably the most fashionable in the room.
Jakara says her best friend Raven Gant had a knack for style, and she earned it.
Raven has always been a super hard worker.
Raven was an accounts manager at Union Depot Hotel, a hardworking mom to JJ.
I want her to know that she had an awesome mom who loved her very, very much.
She uses the past tense because Raven was killed on Thanksgiving Day.
It was just like any other holiday. And I had no idea of all of this that was going on because of the lengths that my sister was going through to protect this man.
That man is JJ's dad, Randall Watkins.
My daughter knew that she was being abused and she tried to get out of it. But by the time she tried to get out of it, it was a little bit too late.
Raven and JJ had moved out of Watkins' home. Police reports say Raven went back Thanksgiving to retrieve clothes when Watkins shot her with little JJ close by.
She was my backbone, my rock, and I miss her every second, every minute of the day.
Now she hopes her family's story of devastation will give others strength to walk away.
That's not okay for any women, for any young adult, for no female to experience. It's just not right.
Earlier that day, Raven had gone to the residence to retrieve clothing and personal items. The house belonged to her former boyfriend, Randall Watkins, the father of her child. According to investigators, the visit was not random. It followed a series of disputes over property and access. Law enforcement records would later show prior domestic disturbance calls involving the same individuals. Evidence collected at the scene indicated the shooting occurred inside the home, not outside or during a confrontation in public. The firearm used was recovered. The suspect did not deny being present. Statements from witnesses, including information provided by the child, directed officers to the location of the victim. Raven was transported to a nearby hospital, where she was pronounced dead later that night. The autopsy would confirm a single fatal gunshot wound. Investigators began reconstructing the final hours leading up to the shooting, examining phone records, prior police reports, and witness accounts. As the case moved forward, prosecutors alleged the shooting was intentional. The suspect was charged with second-degree murder. Court filings would reveal a pattern of control, prior incidents, and warnings that had gone unheeded. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in. Raven Bianca Gant was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She was 27 years old at the time of her death on Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 2019, a date confirmed in multiple public news reports. Gant's family structure included her parents and siblings. She had a close connection with her immediate family, as public statements from her father and mother during court proceedings and media coverage indicate regular contact. Her mother, Lakeisha Gant, and father were involved in her life and later became key figures in post-incident proceedings. In terms of education and employment, available reporting notes that Raven worked in hospitality management. Specifically, she held a position as an accounts manager at the Union Depot Hotel in Minneapolis. Her employment history reflects involvement in client services and operational duties related to hospitality management, indicating responsibility and professional stability. Friends and family described Gant as organized and diligent in her work. Though personal character descriptions vary, public commentary from acquaintances highlighted her interest in fashion and personal style. A broader picture from local articles on domestic violence notes that she was seen as someone suffering in a relationship but striving to maintain normalcy in daily life. Raven Gant's relationship with Randall Jermaine Watkins began as a romantic partnership. The two met prior to the birth of their child. According to court documents and appellate filings, their relationship lasted approximately 3 years and ended about a month before the fatal shooting. During the relationship, Gant and Watkins had a daughter, known publicly as JJ, who was 2 years old at the time of the incident. Throughout their time together, they shared parental responsibilities, though reports indicate escalating conflict over time. Multiple police dispatch and court filings note repeated altercations between them that resulted in involvement by law enforcement. Living arrangements varied during the relationship's course. Public record indicates Gant had been spending time living apart from Watkins in the months before her death, though she still left some personal belongings, including clothing, at the residence they had shared in North Minneapolis. Known conflicts and separations between them were documented in police complaints filed on the date of the incident. Raven reported that Watkins refused to release her clothes and their child's clothes, leading to a domestic dispute call on Thanksgiving Day. Previous contacts with law enforcement reveal a long-term pattern of conflict, including alleged physical abuse. Family members indicated Gant had endured prior assaults, which were significant enough for the family to recognize a pattern of abuse. The timeline of the breakup shows that Gant and Watkins had separated approximately 1 month prior to the incident. After separation, Gant attempted to establish distance from Watkins and improve her situation by taking residence elsewhere with her daughter. However, the matter of shared property, specifically clothing stored at Watkins's residence, became a point of contention. On Thanksgiving Day 2019, Gant went to Watkins's house in the 2600 block of North James Avenue in North Minneapolis to collect clothes belonging to her and her daughter. Law enforcement records include a 911 call made by Gant in which she stated Watkins was refusing to return the items. Efforts by Gant to distance herself from Watkins included maintaining her own residence and reducing personal interactions, but multiple communications remained between them due to co-parenting and the unresolved issue of property retrieval. Her attempts to recover personal effects were hindered by Watkins's refusal to release the belongings, as documented in police reports. Communication patterns after separation were characterized by conflict and legal intervention. On the evening of the shooting, both Gant and Watkins made 911 calls reporting the dispute to police, indicating the level of ongoing tension between them. Randall Jermaine Watkins was 41 years old at the time of the offense. His residence was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the same Jordan neighborhood where the incident occurred. Watkins's employment status at the time of the incident is not widely detailed in media reports or public records, but court documents and news coverage focus primarily on his criminal conduct and personal history. Prior to the Gant killing, public sources indicate Watkins had a record, including a prior murder conviction in 1995 in Illinois, where he shot a friend over a small amount of money. Beyond that, court filings and news articles also note at least one misdemeanor conviction for fifth-degree assault in Minnesota. Additional traffic infractions also appear in his criminal history. Documented behavior in the relationship between Watkins and Gant includes reports of controlling conduct and violent incidents. Multiple witnesses and family statements cited domestic abuse, including reported physical altercations prior to the fatal incident. Police complaints note that witnesses reported Gant had been trying to leave Watkins due to violence. Prior domestic disputes are documented in multiple police calls to the residence. On Thanksgiving evening, both parties called 911. Watkins reported that Gant had punched him, while Gant reported that Watkins was refusing to give her belongings and was preventing her from leaving. Police contacts involving Watkins extended beyond the final incident. Gant's family reported prior instances where Watkins allegedly inflicted injuries on Gant, including occasions where she came home with visible injuries, and in at least one instance family members intervened and contacted police. Witness accounts describing Watkins's conduct include references to his refusal to release property, physical altercations, and aggressive behavior during domestic disputes. These accounts were incorporated into the criminal complaint and testimony during judicial proceedings. Public records and criminal complaints indicate that Watkins was in possession of a firearm at the time of the incident. Police found a loaded handgun on his person when they arrested him at the home. In the days preceding Thanksgiving Day 2019 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, law enforcement and witness accounts indicate ongoing conflict between Raven Gant and her former partner, Randall Watkins. Police records identify that Gant and Watkins had a previously turbulent relationship characterized by domestic disputes and confrontations between the two adults. According to the criminal complaint, Gant had been attempting to separate from Watkins for a period. Witnesses reported that Gant had previously been physically assaulted by Watkins, resulting in visible injuries. During this period, there were documented disagreements over personal property. Watkins was reported to have taken possession of clothing that belonged to Gant and their young daughter and refused to return those items. The clothing included essential garments for both Gant and the child, and Gant repeatedly sought the return of these belongings. The ongoing dispute over property increased tension between the two. Multiple calls and exchanges occurred between Gant, Watkins, and mutual acquaintances as Gant attempted to retrieve her possessions. According to police and accounts from Gant's father, Watkins communicated to Gant that the items would only be returned if she came to his residence at a specified time on Thanksgiving night. Gant's father and other witnesses later told police that the relationship between Gant and Watkins had been tumultuous, and that Gant had previously sought to remove herself from the relationship and protect her daughter from further conflict. This context of ongoing domestic dispute formed the backdrop for the interactions on Thanksgiving Day. On Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 2019, initial plans for the holiday included family activities and routines separate from Watkins' residence. Gant prepared for the holiday with her daughter, 2-year-old JJ, and anticipated spending time with family. Gant's father stated that she would be attending Thanksgiving dinner with relatives prior to the incident. Later in the evening, Gant received communication from Watkins regarding the return of her previously withheld clothing. Watkins contacted Gant and advised that she should arrive at his residence around 9:30 p.m. to collect her belongings. Based on the criminal complaint, Gant agreed to meet him at the address in the Jordan neighborhood of North Minneapolis at that appointed time. Gant's reasoning for the visit was explicitly connected to the retrieval of her belongings and those of her daughter. She had previously been unable to secure these items and expected Watkins to facilitate the exchange during the agreed time window. Gant brought her daughter with her when she left to go to Watkins' home. The child remained with her throughout the night until the moment of the incident. The time of arrival at the residence, according to witness statements and phone records, was shortly after 9:30 p.m. Police and family members later confirmed that Gant was at the address in the 2600 block of North James Avenue North when events unfolded. The layout of the home where the incident occurred was typical of a North Minneapolis residential structure. The house contained a kitchen and dining area toward the rear of the main floor. Investigators later documented that the fatal shooting unfolded in the threshold between the kitchen and dining room area. At the time of the incident, the only individuals present inside the residence were Raven Gant, Randall Watkins, and their daughter JJ, who was 2 years old. No additional adult occupants were recorded by police at the scene prior to officers entering. Upon arrival, Gant intended to collect her clothing. Interactions between Gant and Watkins prior to the shooting included communication about the return of her property and potential exit from the residence thereafter. The specific nature of their conversation inside the house has not been fully disclosed in public records, but investigative testimony cited in the criminal complaint indicates that a confrontation occurred between the two immediately preceding the shooting. The child was in close proximity during this interaction. Witness accounts and police reports confirm that JJ was observed standing in the dining room when officers later arrived and began questioning her about her mother's location. Law enforcement records and the autopsy report state that the shooting occurred in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room inside the residence. Investigators determined that Raven Gant was struck by a single gunshot wound. The wound was located in the left side of her back, consistent with backward trajectory evidence noted in the autopsy. The firearm used in the shooting was recovered by officers at the scene. Police found the suspect, Watkins, at the front door of the home and took him into custody. A loaded handgun was located on his person and was believed to be the weapon used in the fatal shooting. The immediate aftermath of the gunshot saw Gant collapse onto the floor near the threshold area. There was no indication in the criminal complaint that other individuals intervened between the moment of discharge and the positioning of Gant's body. The child remained inside the residence, unharmed physically by the shooting itself, but present in the proximity of the event. Following the gunshot, Watkins remained at the scene. Police reports indicate that he did not attempt to flee the residence prior to law enforcement arrival. Instead, Watkins was encountered at the doorway by responding officers and was detained by Minneapolis police. The trajectory and placement of the fatal wound suggested a downward and backward path as Gant was shot. Investigators determined that Gant was incapacitated immediately following the gunshot and did not leave the threshold area between the dining room and kitchen. JJ, the child, remained inside the residence throughout and immediately after the shooting. Officers later documented that when police asked the child where her mother was, she pointed to the floor and responded that, "She's on the floor," indicating the location of the victim's body. At approximately 10:08 p.m., a phone call was placed that would initiate the emergency response. According to police records and statements taken later during the investigation, the call to 911 originated when Gant reached out to her father. She informed him that Watkins would not allow her to leave the residence once she had arrived to collect her belongings. Detailed dispatch logs confirm that statements referencing the inability to exit the house were overheard by dispatchers during relevant radio traffic. The dispatcher initially received conflicting reports relating to domestic disturbance details, including statements from Watkins alleging that Gant had struck him. These statements interspersed with ranger calls indicating that Gant could not leave the home. At one point in the recording, transferred dispatch logs contain recorded statements that Watkins reported an emergency and that she's been shot, prompting immediate escalation of the emergency call. Minneapolis police officers responded to the scene following the 911 call. Initial responding units arrived at the address in the 2600 block of James Avenue North, where they encountered Watkins at the front door. Officers immediately took Watkins into custody without recorded resistance. Upon entering the residence, officers located Raven Gant lying on the floor in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room with an apparent gunshot wound. Officers administered life-saving measures at the scene before paramedics arrived. Officers also located the child, JJ, standing in the dining room area. Police directly questioned the child regarding the whereabouts of her mother, and she indicated the location of the body. After confirming the positions of the individuals and securing the scene, officers established a perimeter and ensured no additional threats were present. Watkins was transported into custody under arrest at that point. Following on-scene first aid efforts, paramedics transported Gant to North Memorial Medical Center, where further medical interventions were performed. Despite attempts to stabilize her condition, Gant was pronounced dead later that night from the gunshot wound. Paramedic reports and hospital intake logs confirmed that the fatal injury was a result of the gunshot wound, and no additional incidents occurred between the time of paramedic arrival and death confirmation. Once the shooting was confirmed and the immediate medical response concluded, investigators began processing the scene. The primary physical evidence included: a loaded handgun was recovered on the suspect at the doorway where he was detained. This handgun was catalogued and later examined as the presumed weapon used in the shooting. Ballistics analysis confirmed that one round had been discharged, and the gun was consistent with the wound pattern documented in the autopsy. Investigators documented bloodstains on the floor and threshold area, establishing the point of impact and orientation of the victim's body immediately after the shooting. Given that the firearm was recovered loaded on the suspect, investigators also catalogued spent ammunition and casings as part of the evidence. Investigators conducted thorough documentation of the crime scene. This included detailed photographs were taken of the body, bullet trajectory, and spatial relationships between key elements such as the kitchen doorway, dining area, and doors. Investigators precisely mapped the body's position between the kitchen and dining room to understand angles of fire and possible movement following the shooting. No additional signs of a physical struggle were observed beyond the singular shooting area, indicating that the confrontation resulted in a single discharge event rather than an extended physical altercation. Forensic analysts conducted multiple evaluations as part of the investigative process. Samples from the weapon and location were collected for gunshot residue analysis to confirm the proximity and usage of the firearm at the scene. Forensic ballistic specialists analyzed the bullet trajectory and wound characteristics to determine the probable distance between shooter and victim. Experts evaluated the angle and placement of the wound to confirm that the firearm was discharged from behind the victim, as indicated by the autopsy and scene evidence. An autopsy was conducted following the death of 27-year-old Raven Gant after she was shot inside a Minneapolis residence on Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 2019. The medical examiner determined the official cause of death was a gunshot wound sustained during the incident. The autopsy confirmed that Gant died from a single gunshot wound to the back. The location and trajectory of the bullet were identified as consistent with a fatal shooting. Law enforcement records and news reporting specify that she was shot once and that the wound was determined to be the cause of her death. Medical examination of Gant's body established that the bullet entered her left side of the back. The location of this wound was documented both in news reporting and the criminal complaint filed against the suspect. Forensic findings reported that the bullet penetrated from the back. The autopsy conclusion that the projectile entered the left posterior side of her torso is consistent with the documented physical findings by investigators. The path of the bullet was judged to be internally lethal, with no indication of non-fatal trajectory. The medical examiner's official determination identified the gunshot wound as the direct cause of death. There were no alternative or contributing causes listed in publicly available court or law enforcement summaries. Raven's death was ruled a homicide based on the fatal injury she sustained. Public news sources and complaint filings do not disclose detailed toxicology results. No verified reporting has released specific blood work or toxicology findings in the Gant case, and law enforcement did not publicize any intoxicant influence or impairment in publicly available charging documents at the time of conviction. Because official documentation is limited on this point, toxicology results are not part of the publicly reported factual record. No public source available. Based on hospital records and investigative reporting, Gant was transported to North Memorial Medical Center after being shot, where she was pronounced deceased shortly before 11 p.m. on November 28. The timing of the shooting is corroborated by police dispatch logs and subsequent medical confirmation of death that evening. Statements from family members and close contacts were documented in the police complaint and in news reporting. According to those complaints and reports, Raven's father told officers that his daughter had been trying to distance herself from Randall Watkins for a period of time and that she had suffered physical abuse in the past, including injuries such as black eyes attributed to confrontations with Watkins. Raven's father communicated to police that shortly before the shooting she called him at 10:08 p.m. on Thanksgiving and reported that Watkins was preventing her from leaving his home. This call was used by investigators to establish her attempt to escape and retrieve possessions. Family members described that Raven and their granddaughter had been staying with her father at a separate residence and that she had been attempting to separate from Watkins, refusing to live with him. Witness accounts communicated to police reflect a documented concern by Raven about her situation and her attempts to secure her belongings. According to police reports contained in the criminal complaint, Gant's father stated that he had previously confronted Watkins about signs of physical altercation on Gant. The complaint indicates that during one such confrontation, Watkins fired a shot at him as he was leaving, though news reporting does not document criminal charges for that incident specifically. Publicly available reporting and filings indicate repeated domestic tension between the parties, including disputes over Gant's and their daughter's clothing and access to personal property at the residence Watts occupied. News reporting also notes that Watkins had claimed Gant had struck him, which was part of his narrative to 911 operators, though his claims were contested by family members and ultimately rejected by a jury. Before the fatal shooting was discovered, the Minneapolis police dispatcher received multiple calls related to the domestic matter that night. Both Watkins and Gant separately called 911 reporting the dispute. Watkins reported that Gant was refusing to leave and that she had kicked him. Raven reported that Watkins would not return her clothes and she believed he might have a weapon, according to police logs. When police initially arrived on the scene after the first call, they found the house dark and quiet and received no response at the door. Officers left the residence to handle another situation and were later redirected back after additional calls from Watkins. The dispatch recordings reflect repeated communication attempts describing the confrontation between the parties leading up to the shooting. Record summaries indicate that after the first arrival and departure of officers, Watkins again called 911, once stating that Gant was refusing to leave and again that he needed assistance. These repeated calls were documented in law enforcement logs and became part of the investigative record. The dispatcher relay between officers and parties at the home was documented minute by minute leading up to the report of the shooting. Publicly available sources do not include a detailed history of prior arrests or police interventions at this residence beyond the immediate events of the night of the homicide. No previous convictions for domestic violence were cited in the criminal complaint beyond family testimony, and Watkins's own criminal history noted separately in the prosecution records. When officers entered the residence after being dispatched to the scene of the reported shooting, they found the 2-year-old daughter of Gant and Watkins inside the home. Law enforcement asked her about her mother's location. The child responded that her mother was on the floor, leading officers to locate Gant's body. This statement was documented in the complaint and in subsequent reporting. The officers recorded the child's statement as part of the initial investigative documentation. It provided immediate evidence of Gant's location and assisted responders in identifying the scene for medical and investigative purposes. The child's statement directly contributed to locating the victim for medical personnel. It confirmed that Gant was incapacitated in a central area of the home and allowed officers to focus their investigative actions on that location. Following the report of the shooting, officers arrived back at the residence at roughly the time of the fatal incident. They located Randall Watkins at the door of the home and arrested him at the scene of the shooting. Police took him into custody immediately following the discovery of Gant's body in the interior of the house. In the documented complaint and public reports, Watkins did not resist arrest. He was detained upon law enforcement arrival. Officers recovered a loaded handgun at the scene, which was consistent with the weapon used in the shooting. At the time of initial police contact, Watkins told officers that the child inside the home was his and that Gant was lying on the floor. This statement was recorded contemporaneously with the arrest and prior to formal booking. The criminal complaint filed by the state of Minnesota charged Watkins with second-degree murder with intent, a felony offense under Minnesota law. The charge alleged that he caused the death of Gant by intentionally using and possessing a firearm during the act. Watkins was also charged with additional counts including second-degree unintentional murder and for being a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. These charges were specified in the prosecution's complaint and reflect multiple statutory violations related to his actions and prior status. Defined as causing the death of another with intent to effect death, but without premeditation. Applied when causing death during the commission of another felony, or without intent, but in the course of another violent act. A charge applied when someone barred by law from possessing guns does so regardless of intent. Watkins was held in jail without release on a $1 million bail pending trial, reflecting the severity of the charges and the risk assessment by the court. This bail determination was noted in early reporting following his arraignment after charges were filed. During the pre-trial and trial phase, Watkins's defense asserted a claim of self-defense. The defense argued that Watkins acted to protect himself during the encounter with Gant. This strategy was outlined in trial testimony and in later appellate records. The prosecution advanced its case by presenting evidence that Watkins intentionally shot Gant without lawful justification. Prosecutors introduced witness accounts of prior abuse and forensic evidence, and they countered the self-defense claim. During pre-trial proceedings, standard motions were filed relating to admissibility of evidence and preparation of jury instructions, as reflected in appellate filings. These included motions by the defense concerning self-defense claims and legal standards of intent. At trial, the prosecution presented physical evidence linking Watkins to the shooting, including ballistics, the recovered firearm, and the child's statements. The autopsy findings were introduced to establish that Gant died from a gunshot wound inflicted by the weapon found on the suspect. Multiple witnesses were called, including family members who detailed the history of disputes and past altercations. Testimony from law enforcement officers documented the timeline of calls, the recovery of the firearm, and the condition of Gant's body upon arrival. Medical examiners and forensic specialists provided expert testimony on the cause of death, bullet trajectory, and interpretations of physical evidence consistent with the state's charges. Because of the presence of the couple's 2-year-old child at the scene, the court carefully handled testimony and evidence involving the child. Law enforcement took statements from the child and documented them as part of the evidence, ensuring compliance with procedures for minors in violent crime cases. On October 23, 2020, after deliberation, a Hennepin County jury convicted Watkins on multiple counts including intentional second-degree murder, unintentional second-degree murder, and being a prohibited person in possession of a firearm. The jury's verdict reflected the prosecution's ability to prove each count beyond a reasonable doubt. The verdict included both intentional and unintentional murder charges due to the evidence presented and applicable statutes. Reporting indicates that the convictions were upheld with no indication that major counts were dismissed or merged at sentencing. All counts for which Watkins was convicted were included in the final sentencing determination. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.